Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for what's going to be a fantastic show tonight. Jason and I are looking at the fascinating documentary Behind the Curve from filmmaker DanielJClark. The film follows a number of prominent flat earthers, notably Mark Sargent, and hears out their beliefs and their hypotheses regarding the Earth being a flat disk rather than a spherical globe. Sounds crazy, right? Or is there something to the theory? We're going to find out tonight on Mysterious Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mysterious Library. Today's show is going to be fun. That's all I can say.
It's going to be fun. Ride. Oh, yeah. I can't wait for this one. I really can't. I've been looking forward to it all day. How was your Memorial Day weekend before we jump into the show?
Well, yeah, because we're just after the Memorial Day holiday. Mine was actually really fun. Got a chance to run out for a few hours. I just did as a day trip. To go hang out with Tex and some of the others over at Brown Springs. I was just there for a few hours during the day. It was just a quick day trip. I couldn't be there all weekend like Tex and Brandy were. But, you know, making there's nothing better than making some chili queso over a fire. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, it sounds good.
Oh, it is. It's amazing.
Oh.
And I've fallen in love with the hint of lime chips that you can buy. Like they're tortilla chips and they have lime flavoring in them.
Yeah, I've had
it.
It
is perfect with queso. It's all I'm going to say. It's the best thing in the world.
Nice. I'm getting hungry now. I haven't had dinner. See what I can cook up after the show.
There you go. Well, I'm sorry I didn't realize, or I would have talked a lot longer on it.
No, that's got me like even biting at the bit more now. I was already excited to jump into this episode, so now I'm all reared up and ready to go.
There you go. Well, what did you do for over the holiday?
I went and visited some friends camping nearby at a lake here with my daughter. One of her little friends was camping with her father there, so that was nice. And then the rest of the long weekend, I did gardening, lawn mowing. But the exciting thing I did was I got to go to Amherst to shoot some pretty cool B-roll for the documentary that I'm working on, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, which is about Raymond A. Palmer, the editor of Amazing Stories and perhaps the biggest popularizer of the flying saucer myth when it first erupted back in the mid to late 40s. And I also finally got to meet Raymond Palmer's son, who still lives in the area. And I was nervous about meeting him because I had to find him, and
Mhm.
I didn't know if he'd
Yeah.
be welcoming or whether he'd be like, I don't want to talk about something so far in the back, or who the devil are you? But he was just so gracious, so interested in the topic, just like his father, that you could tell super insightful, super open-minded, ready to talk about different aspects of it. So I was just delighted. And then I also, finally, I've been knocking on the door of the people who own the property of Richard Shaver, Raymond Palmer's friend and
Yes.
co-creator of the Shaver mystery stories, which predates ufology. I've talked about it so much on this show. Hopefully
Mhm.
regular listeners know what I'm talking about. If not, visit
Yeah.
theshavermystery.com and you'll go to my Facebook page about the film. Anyway, I finally knocked on the door on that property for about the third time, and the owners were home, and the man was very open, very kind. I'm allowed to be able to shoot on his property. He had some insight himself. His family had owned that property for 40 years. There'd been one other owner
Oh,
between
wow.
Richard Shaver and him, but he knew who Shaver was. He knew about the rock books. He knew, like, he was aware of it, which was, I didn't think he would be. I didn't think whoever was there now would even know who the devil Richard Shaver
Yeah.
was. So that was good. Yeah. So it was probably the most. I didn't shoot the most footage I've shot so far for the documentary, but I would say it was the single highlight of the documentary process so far. So I had a great day.
It's really exciting.
Thank
I
you.
mean, being able to meet and speak with Palmer Jr., that's
Yeah, Ray
again,
B.
I can't
Palmer.
be more excited for you,
Yeah,
honestly.
just a lovely man. So I'm so happy with how well that went.
Wonderful. All right. Well, there you go. Quick preface: we are definitely going to be talking about our thoughts about Flat Earth at the end of the episode, because obviously we need to discuss the actual documentary. This is what we do: we review the content. So I do want to start with the actual documentary itself. I mean, aesthetically, it's very well done. I liked this one. As far as the aesthetics behind it, the editing, it's very, very clever. It's fun. It isn't self-indulgent. I think there's a lot of documentaries that tend to be self-indulgent with their editing. This isn't. If you haven't seen it, you can go find it for free on Tubi. You can watch it with some ads. It's worth the watch, regardless of what you think about Flat Earth. It is absolutely worth the watch, because ultimately it's about the people within it, right? Their story, their history. Again, it's very, very well done. It's very well shot. It's not. It doesn't rely exclusively on the gonzo stuff or gotcha stuff, but there is some really interesting questions and really interesting scenes where you can tell the filmmakers are right there with the people they are documenting and asking them some of the harder questions.
Yeah, they could have, if it had been, say, Louis Theroux, who is one of my favorite people in the space of talking to fringe groups, but he always goes in there in a very friendly capacity, but he always has those gotcha moments, and ultimately, I think, portrays most of the people that are the crazier groups that he deals with, in the end, fairly unkindly, really. But this documentary is very fair, I think. To be honest,
Yes.
I think you want to save what you and I both believe about flat Earth theory for later in the show, which I'm happy to do as well. But I would have probably, knowing that it had been a mainstream documentary, which had, I think, done the fest circuit and major fests and had been on Netflix and things like that, I probably would have expected it to be a little more hostile to flat Earth theory than it was. And it gives lots of time, incidentally, to scientists who are critical of flat Earth theory as well. But I don't think there was any knockout shot from any of the scientists that really upended the flat Earth theory, to be honest. There was one moment which I think could have been the knockout, and whether without giving too much away, it wasn't played the way I thought it was about to be played. So it was it's interesting in that capacity. And you're right, the people are fascinating as well. Mark Sargent, who apparently, I knew nothing about the flat Earth community before watching this documentary, is apparently one of the main movers and shakers in the field, and he doesn't come across as some radical nut job, evil, wicked person. He comes across as very normalish, middle class, middle American kind of guy who seems fairly well read, fairly well educated. He doesn't seem fanatical at all. The main female flat earther in the documentary, whose name is, what's her name again?
Patricia Steer.
Patricia Steer. My goodness, she's also sounds very sane. She's probably the most attractive conspiracy theorist type I've ever heard speak. I mean, she's very charismatic. She's
What?
very engaging. Well,
Me?
other than you. I don't think of you as a
Okay.
conspiracy theorist, though, Jason. So
Oh, that's fair. That's
I'm
very
talking
fair.
about people and I guess you place Hollow Earth theory and conspiracy, not Hollow Earth. That's another thing we'll talk about another episode. You put flat Earth theory in conspiracy
Yeah.
theory because it requires this very large, elaborate conspiracy theory to allegedly have kept the theory of the reality of the Earth, under wraps for so long. So yeah, they're both very engaging. And they've got a wonderful chemistry. So it's watchable for that alone, just the
Mhm.
two main subjects. And it's fascinating to
Yes.
get an insight because as somebody who's spent time at an academic level looking at the UFO community quite extensively back in the late 90s, it's you feel like a fly on the wall, just like I did when you're in their conventions and you're listening to them
Yeah.
talk and you're seeing them interact. And so in that capacity, the documentary, I think, did a wonderful job. Wonderful
Yeah.
job.
No, precisely. Like you said, it's very fair to both sides, I think. It doesn't it allows everyone to sort of get their say. But if there is a knockout blow done in the film, it's really self-inflicted by the people in the documentary itself. So if there is any clever editing, it's in allowing the subjects themselves to do certain things, right? Documentaries have been out. We don't want to give away too many spoilers, but the last few minutes of the film, really that's what 10-15 minutes is where a lot of things sort of come to a head. So like you said, they don't really give it to the mainstream scientists, and they're fair on both sides. But if there is anything that is a direct sort of knockout to the theory, it is their own experiments,
Right.
which was very clever editing.
And objectively, I think probably they were doing these
Mhm.
studies and they let the people film them. And the
Oh, they
flat
did.
Earth folks thought that it would be a positive win for their side, but they also didn't seem to be, I suppose, guarded in showing these things to the documentarians. There's even an earlier experiment where
Mhm.
one main flat earther is talking about something ongoing which seems to be problematic for flat earth theory that they're doing. And that
Yes.
plays you right within the last probably 30, 40 minutes, as well as the final experiment at the end. But what I think, speaking about the scientists as you did, is worth saying. If you are like me, and no offense, Horace Smith, who's listening, because you're a scientist that I love, there are a few of you. I have a complete disdain for the science. No, I do. I have a
I know.
complete disdain for the
I know.
scientific establishment, as anybody who watches this show or listens to Talking Weird knows. I consider myself, nobody's 100% any philosophy, but I think I fall closer to a genuine Fortean than most people who wear that label today. I don't think Bigfoot's going to be discovered by science. I don't think we're going to get a piece of an ashtray from Roswell, which is going to prove that UFOs are real. I don't think anyone's going to prove spirit communication is real using the type of scientific method that all of these people think they're going to be able to do, to knock on the doors of the scientific institution. Here's the proof, and it opens. I don't think that proof exists. But even if it did, the paradigm is much harder to crack than just thinking you have a good ghost video or a DNA sample of a Sasquatch to change everything. So
Right.
as somebody who's interested in all of these type of ideas and all of these type of things, I understand that science is essentially the enemy to a way forward if you're trying to use science as a way forward. And in the past, we have seen it be a legitimate destructive force to, for example, the UFO community. I'm talking about the Condon Committee in 1969. The Condon study was no doubt flawed, no doubt politicized against the idea of flying saucers being extraterrestrial. And I don't think they're extraterrestrial either, but I think there's something there. But the way the Condon's bias disturbed ufology so much, including people who really knew, who were somewhat attached,
Yep.
led ufology to forever change its course in some ways. 1969 onwards, that's when Jacques Vallée throws science and the extraterrestrial hypothesis overboard, writes Passport to Magonia, and suggests the secret to all of this may be found in older fairy faith and occult traditions. And then you get a descending paranoia of the more ETH type people in ufology who already were suspicious of the government and suspicious of scientific institutions. That was the final nail in their coffin as well,
Yep.
as far as any open discourse with the community, and they spiraled into all kinds of paranoia. And that is, in many ways, that is to blame on the behavior of the Condon Committee, which didn't act objectively in their study of the flying saucer phenomenon.
Right.
So
Real
science, my point is that
Oh,
I
no,
have a
please.
real problem with science anyway. And I think, in fairness, this documentary, no scientist in there impressed me. You know, it wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, he's made a great point against the hollow earth theory. Mostly it was people kind of going, well, like these crazy hollow earthers, or it was, well, we're not going to help them come to our side by being so mean and vitriolic. We have to reach out a kind hand and help them come and see the truth. So it was either super condescending in a kind way, or condescending in a just these people are nuts kind of way. And when I'm looking at those scientists in the documentary, I'm
Mhm.
thinking these people are as influenced by the society that they exist in other words, the scientific institution, as the flat earthers are in the society that they exist in other words, commuting and
Yeah.
communicating with other flat earthers. One scientist makes this point and going, all of these people, if they realize they're wrong, they can't leave anyway, because if they leave, the science isn't going to want them anyway. We're so mean, and all of their friends are no longer going to be their friends. And I'm thinking it would be much harder for you as a scientist to come out
Mhm.
and to have a problem with something like the earth not really being around, or name any major scientific, and some
Right.
probably some scientific paradigms probably are, you know, things I'm more comfortable with agreeing with than others. But as a scientist, you buck the
Mhm.
paradigm, you're in far more trouble than the flat earther who bucks the flat earth paradigm, who can then just go and jump on another conspiracy or go to a UFO conference or find friends in this
Right.
space somewhere else.
Yeah.
You have doomed yourself in the scientific institution. And we see that again and again with people like
Mhm.
James McDonald, who ultimately committed suicide, one of the great
Yes.
scientists looking at the flying saucer
Mhm.
phenomenon back in the day. He had skeptical scientists trying to get him blacklisted, trying to
Mhm.
destroy his career aggressively because he thought flying saucers might have been extraterrestrial. So believe me, if you're a scientist, you have far more to lose by criticizing a paradigm than a
Mhm.
flat earther does by criticizing the paradigm. Far more to lose. So
Yeah.
taking that into account and seeing a scientist talk about that, I'm so super conscious that these people are expressing a belief that has been drilled into them, regardless of the reality of it. Because there's other things in paradigms again that I'd be much happier to dismiss, perhaps, than their belief in a spherical Earth, and they would be
Mhm.
just as reluctant to dismiss that. And you see that with them lumping flat Earthers in with every other politically or socially PC untenable position. So they'll just rattle
Mhm.
off. And in fact, they're so victorious, science, that we can't mention some of those positions on this show
Yeah.
without a fear of getting a strike or a ban. So science isn't this great open institution which is open to all kinds of ideas. They've dominated the conversation so much that the type of things they're critical of, some of them,
Mhm.
and incidentally paid for by corporations with a vested interest in pushing
Yes.
money in one direction, that people like you and I can't have a free conversation about some of these paradigms
Mhm.
on a show like this without fear of, oh, we're going to get a strike and we're going to get Untold Radio thrown off of a platform.
Yeah. No,
So that's how
precisely.
open science is and how, you know, non-biased science is. No.
Real quick, my Willie S57, he asks, "What about me? I'm an academic." Well, you and Horace are gonna have to fight this out for Dean's love and acceptance.
Oh, I love
So
my Willie as well. He's
go
Joe
grab like a
Fox.
nice little kiddie pool, throw some lime jello in it. You two wrestle that out. That's all I can say. Um, so real quick, you're right. That scene where he's like, you can't leave. They do. This is one of the things I really do like about this is they do spend a lot of time talking about how this culture is brought together, right? And the question is asked, but because he uses oh, I just forgot his name. The main character or the main guy,
Mark
Mark Sargent.
Sargent. Yeah.
I have it written down over here. So Mark Sargent talks about the Truman Show several times, right? The movie with Jim Carrey where he's playing he's not so in the movie he literally is a human being who was born into this television show that's on this massive lot, right? And everyone in the film or everyone in that city are actors playing roles, but he thinks it's real. And of course the end result is, or the end of the movie is he floats out on a boat to the edge of the sound studio and leaves, right? That's one of the big metaphors of the documentary. And Sargent says, it's one thing for Truman, to Jim Carrey's character, to be able to leave, right? Because he doesn't have anything to lose at that point. He says, but if you're the mayor of that town, right? You've got all this money, you've got this prestige, it would be much more difficult for you to leave. To which they ask him that very same question. Well, but aren't you the mayor of the Flat Earthville? Because he was, to your point is that, well, these academics and these scholars and these scientists, they can't go against the paradigm like you were talking about because they have so much more to lose. To which they said, but you're also the mayor of Flat Earthville, for lack of a better term. So it's interesting that in many ways, the way the filmmaker sets this up is that they're both in the same, they do kind of say, hey, they're both in the same pot here. They're both in the same boat. And there does seem to, I'm going to be a little bit kinder to several of the scientists in the film. I do think there's a little bit more sincerity, not necessarily always, we need to help them across. Although, yeah, that there was a lot of condescension but some of them aren't, they didn't strike me as being very condescending. They're saying, hey, these are people who are in many ways doing science, right? These are people, there's a gentleman who's a physicist who even says, hey, we need people who are willing to think outside the box. They even sort of call out their own paradigm. But you're right, they do throw in several things or topics that we can't even discuss on this channel, because to do so would, whether I agree with them or not, is irrelevant. Even discussing them would get us shut off of YouTube.
Well, there are things I agree with that are mentioned as being terrible, which I actually really do agree with, and I don't have the ability to have free speech about them and maintain a position on a platform like this. And to be honest, the scientific institution, the scientific establishment is in many ways responsible for that.
Right.
In many ways I mean, they're corporate lackeys most of the time. And that's part of the reason. But the fact that science is unable to see outside of a paradigm is a massive reason.
Well, Bamboo Soldier points this out. He says they're gatekeepers, right? That's one of the things about, again, why I'm not in archaeology right now. I saw very, very clearly, I got a good upfront look at, oh, hey, this isn't what it claims to be, right? And there is, again, I don't think the filmmakers spent enough time sort of on that aspect of it, but it is at least addressed to say, hey, if you step outside that paradigm, they do put that there. It's like, if you do step outside that paradigm, you're kicked out of there as well, right? It in many ways, both groups are sort of trapped within their own ideologies. Now, that being said, obviously they are spending more time on the flat earthers, right? And we do see several people who in their interviews are saying that they've lost family members over this stuff. They have. And it's been deleterious to their personal lives. So, but at least a lot of the people that are interviewed from the mainstream science perspective are quick to point out these are not, most of these flat earthers, they're not stupid or uneducated or just crazy. And that's a point that is made several times. Like, these people are looking at things just from a different perspective. Again, we'll get to whether or not we agree with them later, but they at least do point out, like, look, these are not just a bunch of uneducated hicks running around. These are people who are trying to think through a problem, and they are willing to do it outside the box, and they're willing to do even experiments that they thought, hey, one of the engineers they have on says, it's actually it's just a cool idea on how to perform one of the experiments. Sorry, I'm choking because it's spring in Texas, although we're into summer now, and of course Texas tries to murder me every year. Texas, I love you. Why must you hate me with your pollen? So again, overall, the documentaries, I think it's fair to both sides, and it's really very, very well done, and gives you a chance to get emotionally invested in these people, and yet they don't hide the flaws either on either side.
Yeah, no, that's true. I do think there is the reason ideas like flat earth have a tendency to be attractive is because
Mhm.
there is a general crisis of confidence in the scientific establishment. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I'm somebody with a PhD and I don't trust the scientific
Mhm.
institution, the scientific establishment. The history of science is the history of it being manipulated and used
Mhm.
to further certain agendas and paradigms being victorious, which fit specific social ideas or corporate agendas of the time. I mean, we can
Yeah.
go back and I often hear, well, you'd be in the dark ages without science, which is total rubbish. We got out of the dark ages because changes in philosophy, not changes in science, and changes
Mhm.
in social structure, not changes in science.
Well,
But if you think science is
the Dark
wonderful,
Ages wasn't really the Dark Ages either.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful book by Huizinga about the waning of the Middle Ages, which suggests that a lot of these Renaissance ideas actually already existed in the Middle Ages. But
Yeah.
that's a song for another time, perhaps. But I think the problem is people often have this idea that, well, we'd be lost without science. Well, could you explain that? And we'll get to Ed's point in a minute.
Mhm.
Could you explain that to somebody in a Nazi death camp or somebody starving in the Soviet Union because of the dominant grain science there at the time had some whacked out idea?
Mhm.
Or can you explain how wonderful science is to somebody who got poisoned by DDT or a baby turned into total cripple by thalidomide? And I mean, the list goes on and on and on and
Right.
on. Talk to somebody today who has cancer because of all of the type of pesticides and plastics in bottles and all of these other things which are poisoning us. That's industrialized science. Now, I'm not somebody who wants to take us back to the dark ages or take us back to a time without any
Mhm.
type of applied technology, but I'm also not naive enough to think science is always good. I follow the science. What would happen if you said I follow the science in Nazi Germany or in the Soviet Union?
Yeah.
Or if you followed the science when you use DDT to spray down, as a defoliant on things, or when you followed the science because the doctor told you that
Mhm.
thalidomide was going to be good for you. To follow the science is with anybody with any understanding of the history of science and the ways that paradigms have shifted and changed. If
Mhm.
you'd followed the science once, you would have thought the earth was flat. If you'd followed it another time, you would have thought that asteroids could never fall from the sky, and that was really lightning hitting a rock and heating it up.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
there was just as many ludicrous things today. Again, things which have been proven totally incorrect, I still can't even talk about, which the scientific establishment have pushed aggressively in recent times. So I have no love lost for science. And I think while you're right, there are scientists within this program who appear to be somewhat kinder and gentler. They're all still people who are operating within this system where they really do think that they know better than everybody else. But history does
Mhm.
not play that out. History does not
No.
tell me science is always or even often or
Mhm.
even regularly right. But let's just quickly
Yep.
hit Ed Schultz's point, and then I'll be quiet for a minute.
Yeah.
Ed Schultz made the great point. I think this is going back to when I was talking about, James McDonald, for example, in UFO research. He said the same is also true of parapsychology. And he points out that Russell
Mhm.
Targ says if you tell other scientists that you believe in psychic phenomenon, you will lose your funding and your standing in the scientific community. And I
Yes.
remember Grover Krantz in the Bigfoot community used to say, I always say that my institutions support my research into Bigfoot. Bigfoot studies because, well, they haven't fired me yet. So that is how they
Yes.
supported him by
Mhm.
not firing him because he knew the dangers in the
Yes.
scientific institution of coming forward. I'm sure Jeff
Mhm.
Meldrum has faced these kind of issues.
Oh, he
I
absolutely
mean,
has.
these
Yes.
these are closed communities which are not open to ideas outside of the paradigm.
No. 100%. And again, the movie does or the film does a very good job of not dressing it as directly as I or you would like, but they do bring up the issue of scientism essentially being a replacement for religion. I mean, in many ways, that's what it is. And we've talked about that on this channel. That again, you and I differ only in you would say science, I would say scientism. I do think as I see science as merely the tool, and I think there are people who can do good science and we can come up with at least something. But I do think that the issue is scientism, where it's whatever the orthodoxy is, that's what's true. And they do call it out that essentially what we have is we've made again science a new religion. It's
Oh, for
again
sure.
follow the science. Well, hold on, that's not how science works. If you can't question it, if you can't if you can't question, then it's not science.
I love how Horace called me out on my rant. It's turning into a rant more than an argument. I agree I'm having a bit of a rant, but I think when you live in a world where phrases like 99% of scientists agree, so you can't question it, or where you live in a world where I follow the science is the response to somebody who doesn't agree with you, or if you live in a world where presidents say the science is settled, I think there's a real need to call science into question and to rail at it like Charles Fort did, because it often is not your friend.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is why I would say there's a difference between science and scientism. Because to your point, there was a time when 99% of scientists would have said Einstein was a lunatic.
And
Right?
I think that's sorry, you go.
No. I mean, and that's again, last couple of years, we don't have to look very far to point out how, whether it's the food sciences, right? Things that are good or bad to be eaten have radically been thrown out the window. We've seen this with psychiatry, specifically with Prozac and those chemicals.
What about lobotomies?
Alzheimer's.
What about 50 years ago they would have given you a lobotomy just in a doctor's office? You would go in and they just pull out the ice pick, some doctors, and give it to you right there and then.
Yeah.
There was
exactly.
one doctor, I think, within the last 100 years. I forget his name. He's quite famous. In the space of his career, he'd literally done thousands of just in-home and in-office frontal lobotomies. Can you imagine?
Yep.
So was he your friend? Was that scientist? Was that member of the medical community your friend? Don't think so.
And that's where, again, to CF's point here, right, is there's nothing wrong with science, but there's a few things wrong with humans, which is my point. That's why I would separate science from scientism, because science is just a tool.
Well, I just quickly say, because I know that's your point, I won't talk long because I know I've been ranting, but I do think that because it's a human endeavor, it's like any tool or any endeavor when humans become involved, it lacks that purity. So to talk about science without talking about humans being involved in it, there wouldn't be any science. And therein lies the rub. So you can't talk about an independent science. I know the idea. I think it's fair enough that Babu Suja, sorry if I mispronounced your name, Babu, talks about an independent science, but the reality is sure, you can be independent of the establishment, but once people get into science, you get this sociological endeavor, which is native to all human endeavors, being as a driving force as this objective science. And I think that's the main point. My main takeaway, or the main takeaway I would give the audience, is to look at Thomas Kuhn's work on the philosophy of science and the structure of scientific revolutions, and to understand that science is as science. I'm comfortable saying science because it's something humans do, is as much of a sociological endeavor as anything else. So it is going to have all the problems of every other human endeavor. But we tend to, which is fine. Okay, let's acknowledge that. But the problem is people won't often step back and acknowledge that and then go, well, maybe we should question this idea that you can't question science, because if it's just another human endeavor, surely there's problems in there. And there is a history of, falsifications of reports and, people misreading the evidence, people doing all kinds of things. So science isn't this paragon of virtue that everybody thinks it is either. So that's the only reason I perhaps rail. And again, I'm sorry, Horace, is because so few people in this society will rail, even within the Fortean community or the paranormal community. They all think science is the solution. I just don't see it.
No. And again, I don't think that we disagree on the larger point, right? I like to, because again, science being a tool versus the worship of scientists, which is where we are. And again, they do make that point very plainly in the film, which is to say, hey, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson are basically they're the new version of priests, Michio Kaku. It's kind of what they've become. It's like, this is what you're allowed to believe. This is the new orthodoxy. This is the new dogma. Even though if we were to sit them down on this show, they would never come on this show. Dean would his head would explode probably. Exactly. However, if we were to ask both of them and say, look, 100 years from now, would it be fair to say that if we could time travel into the future and ask them how they viewed every single scientific hypothesis or theory that we currently have, and it's like, this is the accepted paradigm, in 100 years, every scientist would say, no, we've either A, moved beyond that because we've disproven those theories or hypotheses, or we've gained such a broader understanding that the context of those hypotheses and theories have been, even if they are functionally true, our understanding is so much more nuanced and so much more well refined that they're essentially not true, right? They would have to agree with that because that is the history of science, that everything we started off with in the 20th century, we ended without exception, with the exception being globe Earth and the heliocentric model. But even then, we have fluctuations and our broader understanding of these things.
There's
So
also
that's
sorry, you
sort
go.
of my bigger problem is when we have well, this is settled science. There's no such thing as settled science, and the history of science tells us there's no such thing as settled science. There's only the next working model. It does feel like there is the scientism, this worship of scientists is really nothing more than a worship of the dominant paradigm that is getting the funding from people whose agendas may not be the truth or an honest pursuit of what is real, but may rather be, again, funding of an agenda and a paradigm that suits their political interests.
Or their financial interests.
Or
I
both.
mean, that's the problem. Science isn't done in a monetary vacuum. Somebody's writing that check.
Yes, they
And
are.
then you have to ask who's writing that check. You have to literally, it's a cliche, but follow the money.
Mhm.
Of course, another issue with science, I think, today, and I'm not going to pretend I understand quantum mechanics or quantum physics because people who aren't in that space really don't. But I do think that there are those other edges of science, which I'm not qualified really to comment on, even though as a Fortean, I don't think I need to be qualified. But there's certainly a suggestion within science itself that some of the traditional mechanistic type models of the universe, and presumably everything that follows after that, might not be the reality that we think that they are anyway.
Yes.
For example, reality might depend to a degree on our own perception. That's I think, a very common idea both in New Age philosophy as well as in some observations like light behaving, as particle or as matter, depending how it's observed, and other things which have kind of, spiraled out
Mhm.
from there. So if we start to enter that type of edge of science, you almost start to drift towards a more new age or spiritual or weirder reality anyway. And then you have to start questioning, if everybody thinks the earth is round, is that the way the earth's round? Is that why the earth's spherical? I'm serious.
I know
If
you are.
90
I know
if
you are. I like
99% of
that.
people think it's spherical, is it
Yeah.
spherical? Now, I'm only as serious as that as I would be with any scientific idea because it's all nonsense to me anyway. It's all nonsense on stilts. Unless I can apply it. Like if you're Henry Ford and you give me a combustion engine, thumbs up. If you give me central plumbing so my waste is cleared away and I don't get sick from dysentery, thumbs up. But if you're just somebody in a lab working out some new chemical to preserve food with, which eventually keeps my food fresh for 20 years but gives me cancer 30 years after that or something, it's not, there's no thumbs up for you, science. If you give me something practical which helps me on a day-to-day level, maybe, but then that could kill me anyway. So I don't have this, worshipful thing. But perhaps some of these more recent ideas of quantum physics might throw a lot of this stuff out the window
Yeah.
anyway. None of this might even be approximating real. I'm much more comfortable with that idea.
Can I talk about? I do have to ask one quick.
Sure.
I kind of want to step away from this because we're going to come back to our actual view on flat Earth here in a little bit. But honestly, what I think is the most tragic part of the entire film happens fairly early on, where Mark Sargent is friend zoned, like Zangief suplexing Ryu in Street Fighter. It's so painful to watch. Mark Sargent, again, being sort of the central figure of the film. Patricia Steer is a rather attractive woman who they team up, and everyone seems to try and ship them, as the kids say. And she friend zones him like on camera. There was when it happens in the film, all I can think of is there's this you can probably find online. There's this daytime television game show that I cannot remember the comedian who's from Whose Line Is This Anyway? Anyway, it's this game show that everyone dresses up, and it's these two people, and he asks them, "So are y'all together?" And the guy says, "Yes." The woman goes, "No, we're just friends." And you can see this dude's heart just die on screen. That I think about that every time when I see this film, because she just friend zones Mark Sargent so hard in this film. It's like you can watch his soul die a little bit when
See,
when
I
she's
didn't see it that
yes, we're
bad.
really
She
good
said.
friends, and just
Because
like just
I think there's an agreement they both thought about dating, right? Because
mhm,
they visited each other with some talk of potentially being a couple.
mhm.
This has gone from this ridiculous argument about science to dating body language discussion now. But there seems to be a chemistry there, and there seems to be a time where they almost maybe got together, but then something happened. But who knows how that was edited as well? Like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah,
but I
no,
see your point, and
yeah.
there is a part which she's such an incredibly attractive woman. Like, yeah, she could friend. I'm sure she's friend zoned more guys than
She
she know
she's
what to
friend
do
zoned
with.
many a
And
men, I imagine.
yeah, on every second
Mhm,
flat earther, "You're so pretty, lady. Will you take these
mhm.
flowers from me, please?" She could just live on the donations. She could just have like a donation thing on her flat earth page and all the flat earther fanboys, I'm sure. But that's another funny thing, in it. They suggest she's so attractive that she's some CIA honeypot to
Yes,
somehow throw the community into a ray or
yes.
something, or just so
Which
hilarious.
which is actually, again, one of my favorite parts about this, again, because it is a very honest look at the community. There's stuff that happens, um, that happens in there where within the hold on, lurks a lot. Every man knows that pain. Every single man knows the pain of being friend zoned. I
Speak
swear there was one.
speak for yourself, Jason. I do the friending around here, baby.
I'm
"You're so
done.
pretty, Dean. Will you date me?" "We're just good friends. I
We're
think of you
just
like
good
a
friends.
sister.
We're
You're
just
like a
good friends,
sister to
baby.
me. I
Yeah.
can't date you." I'm
I
joking. Of course I've
swear.
been friend zoned. Everybody's been friend zoned at
Everyone.
some stage.
My favorite one is, why can't I ever meet a guy like you? Just yeah, like I said, that whole scene just. But anyway, back to like everyone apparently is a CIA plant or shill. Everyone in the film, right? Um. Yeah. Again, to Horse's point, it is about the community, and this is and one of the things that really, if you're in this community at all, I mean, the broader Fortean field, you recognize some of the attacks that are made. Like there's this infighting, and everyone is essentially a plant or a shill or some CIA
Oh, the
asset.
UFO community is the worst for that. The UFO
Mhm.
community's been playing that game forever. And incidentally, we know some of them really were UFO
Yeah,
plant. I mean, you really were government plants,
uh-huh.
like William Moore, for example.
Yeah,
But
Richard Doty's like, guys, it's like, but here's the thing, right? That sort of is what inspires, I think, this whole argument. And guys, we've been called plants. I'm like, I am not getting paid enough to be a CIA shill. I mean, unless someone hasn't told me something, because I ain't getting anything. That would make me do stuff. So it's like I'm seeing this, and it's like you particularly when you see people who for a fact are schizophrenics, and they're like, "You're a CIA agent." No, dude. I assure you, I'm not. I'm an escrow officer. I have a day job. Like I am not paid well enough to be a CIA asset. I assure you. But hey, you know what? If the check's good enough, I'm kidding. But it is like it is that very up close look at that community where you do again, you get to feel for these people. You get to see their part of their arguments, but you also see the inherent dysfunction within it,
oh yeah.
right?
And
And that
incidentally, that's in the scientific community as
oh
well.
yeah,
Like this, it's everywhere. It's again, all of these things are sociological endeavors. So you're always going to have
hmm
personality conflicts, people who won't get on this person's train, people who think
yep,
they're right and this person's wrong. And there'll always
hmm
be, usually a dominant group that rises to the top. Sometimes there's not, though. Like Bigfoot research is an example. And when we did that old great 70s or 80s Bigfoot documentary, even maybe 90s, but it looked at the four horsemen who were still alive then, Grover Krantz and John Green and Rene DeHinden and Peter Byrne, and it saw them how they'd kind of gone into this kill and not kill camp, and DeHinden didn't like Grover Krantz's way that he'd measure the paddy footage from the Patterson and Gimlin, and one of them didn't like that the other one wanted to shoot it, and all of this kind of crazy infighting. So that's in the Hollow Earth. I'm sure it is in the Hollow Earth community. See, I think too much about Shaver and Palmer at the moment. That's in the Flat Earth community, just like it's in the UFO community, just like it's in the Bigfoot community, just like it's in the ghost hunting community, just like it's in the hallowed halls of the scientific institution. It's everywhere.
Yes. Although Horace has never had any problems with anyone, because Horace is amazing.
Well, Horace is a lovely human being. Horace makes me want to like science, Horace. So I can't say that many people have made me want to like it. That said, I'll use that as a segue to something else. This documentary makes me want to be a flat earther because the scientists infuriate me so much. Now, here's the big reveal. You wait for it. Here's the big reveal of the show. Dean is not a flat earther. I want to be because the scientific institution annoy me so much. There's a point in the movie which I thought if it was real, this would be a great turning point. But straight away my brain went, no, this isn't real. That's when Mark Sargent is talking about flights in the South Pacific from Australia to South America should be a straight shot from the east coast of Australia to the west coast of South America. And they should be really quick, but no airline in the world is making that flight. And I thought, if that's true, and then I thought, hang on, I think I dropped off a friend at Sydney Airport once who made a flight to Santiago. Sure enough. So let's just show people first who are watching. This is kind of what the flat Earth model looks like. So if you can see in the top kind of, I guess, left-ish top, you can see Australia upside down and kind of,
very
squished out a little bit. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see South America. So if the world was a flat disc, and when they talk about a flat Earth, they do think it's a disc, then you can imagine that is from almost one side of the flat Earth to the other. That flight from the east coast of Sydney to the west coast of South America to Chile, for example, should be a very long time. And then that would be right. Mark Sargent would be right. They wouldn't be doing those flights because they'd be ridiculous amounts of time and they'd never do a straight shot. You'd have to go to North America or Europe or somewhere or change. But unfortunately, Mark Sargent, there is, and I'm not being mean, Mark Sargent, because I see you seem to be a nice guy. I'm sure I could sit down and have a beer with you and we get on just great. But there's a Qantas flight at the moment. You can see the arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen going from the east coast of Australia, from Sydney over to Santiago in Chile. That's a non-stop flight. You could go and book that flight right now on any, travel booking, and it's about a 13-hour flight. In other words, it's about the same time as Sydney to LA higher up in North America. So there isn't any ridiculously long, flight, or you'd have to go to somewhere in North America and change first. So that little point alone, it might seem trivial, but that's a practical way that you can disregard the entire flat Earth theory, because their map again indicates that Australia is on the other side of the planet. And as you can see, it's much closer to North America than it is to South America, if that's what the Earth looks like. While in reality, your flight is, depending which way you're going with a tailwind or not, is 12 something hours, or the other way is like slightly over 14. In other words, almost exactly the same as a Sydney to LA flight. So that alone tells me, without having to use any great scientific calculations, just as a practical good old anti-science boy that I am, that the Earth, according to the globe presented by the flat earthers, is incorrect, and hence the planet seems to be a globe to me.
Now, I know Horace, being the great flat earther that he is probably shocked.
Don't say that. He'll be like, no, I'm not a flat earther. If that quote gets out, it's the end of my career as Professor Emeritus at Michigan State. You're not a flat earther, for anybody listening. Horace is the furthest from a flat earther I've ever met, just in case somebody's listening at the state university there.
At the state university, yes. As am I. I am not a flat earther. And again, the two of the main experiments that they show being performed in this video or in this documentary, both disprove the flat Earth by their own standards. right? There's one where they have this really like a $20,000 gyroscope. And they said, well, if the Earth is really the sphere and it's rotating, it would have to rotate 15 degrees every hour. And so we'd have to see if it, and then they perform the test several times, several different ways. And they're like, oh, it's showing a 15-degree tilt. To which they then say, no, it must be energy from the heavens, right? And then, of course, the second one is they use, and the engineer is even like, this is actually a really clever idea. They have two stakes on either side of at sea level, on either side of this large area. And they shine a very powerful laser, and they want to measure the middle stake. Well, that turns out to be a little too difficult for them to actually pull off. So they do a light where they have essentially two boards with a hole in them both, and then one person is on the other side shining this light, right? And they have to see it. Every time they do it, they show, essentially it disproves their theory, right? It's like, well, if the Earth is flat, then this is what it should look like, and these should be the results. It's disproven, but that's not why I don't believe in flat Earth. As an artist, I mean, there's 1,000 reasons why I don't. But again, going back to the whole, you don't have to be a scientist with millions of dollars worth of equipment to recognize that the modern conception of flat Earth is just not workable. As an artist, I get to say this because this is my wheelhouse. Perspective. If the Earth, again, in the modern conception, can you put up the flat Earth thing again that you had?
There you go.
So if you notice, there's a point in the center of the map, right? That's essentially supposed to be the North Pole. In their conception, the Earth, or the Earth is that flat disk. The sun and the moon just rotate around that point, right? In sort of a circular motion. Well, that would mean, okay, you can take it down now. That what you would see, right, is the sun every morning. It would be dark. You'd see the sun as this teeny tiny point of light. And it would start getting bigger. And it would actually make an arc across the sky. You would see it travel in a circular motion. And it would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it would be right over your head. It would be the biggest it would be. Then it would get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Right? That's what it would do. It doesn't do that. All that happens is it goes up and over and down, and it stays the same size. You can test this with the moon also, right? Where it looks like I messed up my camera by doing that. Hold on. Let me see if I can fix that. There we go. You can test it with the moon. People miss it, but the moon is bigger when it's closer to the horizon. It isn't bigger. It's an optical illusion. Get a pair of calipers, get a ruler, get anything you want. Just go out and you can measure it. It is the same at any point along the sky. That is alone evidence that the sun and moon are not doing what you claim, or what flat earthers are claiming that they are doing. They are traveling across our sky this way. Now, their own model is easily disproven just by watching how the sun and moon move across the sky. That's it. That alone should be enough to say that's not what this is, right? Hold on. Yes, I was popping that up. I have clearly been corrupted by big art. And that's, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. These are not hard things. Like, we literally used shadows and math to prove the Earth was spherical 2,000 years ago. And as a religious Christian, allow me to say this. One of the things, and they do address it in the film as well, that I find slightly annoying. And I love I have friends who are flat earthers. So this is a place of love, what I'm about to say, right? This comes from a place of love. They will say, well, the Bible teaches the Earth is flat. It does not. It does have a flat cosmology, yes, but it does not actually teach the Earth is flat. However, the issue is the modern conception of the flat Earth is just as radical a departure from the biblical idea, right, of the flat Earth. Because again, the people who wrote the Bible had a flat Earth in their head. Yep. their idea, their construction for for what the flat Earth would look like is as radical departure from the biblical perspective as the heliocentric model. And let me pop up an image real quick. This is essentially the biblical conception of a flat Earth, right? The sun and moon again they follow the actual pattern I described. They go up, they go down, they travel underneath. This is not the modern conception of flat Earth, where they are moving in a circular pattern around a central point. That is not how ancient people, whether they wrote the Bible or not, in every culture, essentially conceptualized this flat Earth idea. So I'm sorry, if you're pointing to the Bible for this, you need to find something else, because David would look at your conception and be like, that's not what I'm seeing in my head at all. In fact, that doesn't make any sense, because he'd make the same points I have. Like, but when the sun just get smaller and smaller and smaller at night, and then in the morning would just get bigger and bigger and bigger, like he'd have the exact same complaint. He's like, that's not what the sun does. It goes up and it goes down. It stays the same size. So there you have it. Unfortunately, we are not flat earthers. So
I had to let people down. All of this talk reminds me of that great anecdote about William James, the great philosopher and psychologist and incredibly influential American thinker of the late 19th, early 20th century. And apparently he was at a lecture one time and he was accosted by a little old lady afterwards who told him that, all of his modern falutin didn't, convince her of anything. She knew that the earth was held up on the back of a giant turtle. And William James, I'm assuming, kind of, trying to be nice, said, but what's holding that turtle up? And the woman looked at him and was quite sincerely said, oh, you're not going to try to get around it with your, modern scientific, thinking. It's turtles all the way down.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, pretty
Oh my
good.
gosh, we're living in a Dr. Seuss novel.
Maybe.
We're Yertle in this model.
That's what they need. They need that
wow.
Earth turtle model to come back instead of the flat Earthers, the Earth turtleites. And I don't want to make mock, because it's so easy to make mock of a belief system which is out of favor. And listen, I could make mock about all this stuff till the cows come home, as could you. I'd rather make mock. I'd rather don't kick down, punch up or something. I'd rather punch up at science, because science and its proclamations have pushed far more misery onto the earth, particularly in recent times, than any proclamation by the Flat Earth Society. People speaking for science and using science as their justification have dropped tyranny on people throughout the 20th into the 21st century, which was almost unthinkable even by religious zealots of the past because of the current societal overreach and the size and scope of government. Science now being weaponized as a philosophy is a terribly destructive thing. So again, I could make fun of flat earthers till the cows come home, but why? Let's make fun of science, which is a genuine existential threat to me. Let's criticize the mean kids on the block rather than the poor little kid in the corner who can barely defend himself.
If we're going to criticize them, can we criticize them until the turtles come home?
Man, I'm all for them turtles. I'm going to go to bat for that turtle theory.
It's turtles all the way down.
All the way down, though, man.
All
Not
the
just
way
one.
down.
All the way down.
I just love the idea that we're Yertle. Nimrod is Yertle the turtle. Hold on. There's a story there. I'll come back to it. But there's been an interesting development, right? Which is that, because this was taking place in 2017. I think it came out in 2018, 2019.
Something like that, yeah.
There has been some developments that Dean may find particularly interesting. For example, in 2019, Patricia Steer abandoned the Flat Earth community.
Man, I've only been defending it because she's so attractive. Forget everything nice I said about the Flat Earth Society. Patricia, if you're watching, I agree with you. I'm joking, but she was an attractive woman.
Well, so hold on. I got you. So now, from what I can find, she still apparently at least supports the theory, but she's abandoned the group entirely. Let me throw this up. This is the cover of the book that she did with Noel Hadler, and it's called "Everything That Was Beautiful Became Ugly: Escaping Flat Earth with Patricia Steere."
Wow.
So
you did
she
your
has.
research.
I did.
You like this woman more than I do. I didn't even bother to Google.
No,
it.
I was
Look what
looking for you. I'm trying to help.
Okay.
I'm trying to be a good wingman here. I'm trying to help a brother out. That's all I'm
There you
saying.
go. Gotcha, baby.
I
So
got you.
considerate.
So I'm just saying now. So she shut down again the very channel that made her famous. She shut all that down. Now apparently she just came back with something else, but it's more about recovering from narcissists. Is what the channel is about, instead of all the weird stuff. So
well, just in quick fairness, that mightn't have anything to do with Mark Sargent, if that's at all implied, because
May
she
not.
talked about
Again.
having a relationship she just got out of on that show.
Yes.
Remember, she moved to Italy or she moved
Right.
to France or somewhere, and then it was a horrible relationship, and
I
she
think it was
came
Britain.
back. So
No, London. It was London.
yeah. So well,
Yeah. So again, it may not. Like I said,
somewhere
I'm not
over in that European place over there,
which
over them
we all know
seas.
is a psyop. We all know it's a psyop. Let's be
Well, there's
honest.
no Australia. Remember that theory for a while? Australia didn't
Dude,
exist.
yes. Again, so I had a friend of mine take pictures of the Southern Cross. Horace will appreciate this, because I am going to do on Siru. I'm going to do another. I'm going to do like a series of videos, and one of them will be. I want to do like my definitive, because I just don't care about flat Earth at all. I do want to make like one definitive my point on this, and it's interesting because the flat Earth thing seems to very much be a northern hemisphere phenomena, because we never stop to think about the Southern Cross. Everyone thinks, oh, it's the North Star, it's Polaris. It's like, well, great, but everyone living in the Southern Hemisphere can't see Polaris. That's why the Southern Cross is what you use to navigate by. So again, if the round Earth, the spherical Earth, was an invention of NASA, then you've got hundreds and hundreds of years of sailors. You got to talk to them for a while, because they use the Southern Cross to navigate because they couldn't see Polaris. Explain that one. But again, like I said, I don't necessarily, like to your point, I don't think Patricia Steele is necessarily doing this new show and this new stuff because of Mark Sargent. I won't suggest that at all. If she is talking
I just
like
wanted
that,
to qualify that in case our audience picked
Yeah.
up on that, because I don't know either of them, but they both seem like decent human beings in that documentary to me, to be honest. They were both likable.
Yeah, I don't know what if anything has to do with the other, but she has sort of abandoned that whole group. I haven't read the book. I just discovered the book exists. I don't know that I even care to read it. I'm just saying,
you've got an autograph.
You know what?
copy
I'm
on
just
that
saying,
shelf
Dean.
behind
You could probably call her. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe we should do a show. Maybe we should do her book on Mysterious Library and get her on for the first 20 minutes.
You
That'd
know
be
what?
fun.
That'd
probably rate very well for us.
It probably would. We can, and yeah, you know what? We'll make a love connection here on the show. I'm looking out for you, man. I'm a wingman. I'm a bro.
You're a good wingman. I'll tell you that much right now. But speaking of being a good wingman, it was a fun show tonight. What a blast. Thanks for letting me rant about science. I was in a ranty mood tonight. Apologies, Horace, if I offended yours or any scientists out there sensibilities. Any scientists watching this show, I love you. It's like in Christianity, hate the sinner, hate the sin, not the sinner.
I love that was clearly a Freudian slip on your part.
Well, there you go.
Love the science, hate the scientists. It's like, okay.
Kind of the other way around, but yeah.
Yeah, I knew this was going to be fun. That's why I suggested. I saw it on Tubi. I'm like, I know what we have to do, because I really do love this documentary. Like I said, please guys, go watch it for free on Tubi. It is a great documentary. It's very, very well done. It is interesting to see these these people, and it is very, in many ways, it's probably a little bit more fair than it has any right to be to everyone. But it is remarkably fair, and it is, again, I would have liked them to spend a teeny tiny bit more time on the science of it a little bit. Like, again, why don't they explain, like, what is the explanation for the eclipse? Like that, because the 2017 solar eclipse does occur during the filming of this, and they just say, well, it's like a planetarium. What?
Mhm. Well, and they also
Okay.
they Mark Sargent, of course, mentions that flight path thing I was talking about, and saying there are no flights from direct flights from
Yeah.
Australia to South America, and they even have one of the female scientists pulls
Mm.
up a flight tracker, and it's very brief. She just goes, "Oh, there looks like there's a flight moving south.
Mhm.
What are you doing?" And that's all you see. All you have to do is bring up a Qantas map and call Qantas
Mhm.
and go, "Hey, how long's that flight to Santiago? And can I book a ticket for tomorrow?" "Oh, yes, that's a 13-hour flight, and you can book a ticket." That's and then the whole model just forget
Yeah.
about even working anything scientific. If one
Mhm.
of the base ideas of the platform is that's the way the map looks, so you obviously can't fly there in 13 hours, and
Yeah.
you can get on a plane, drop a couple grand, and fly there in
Mhm.
13 hours, then that should be enough for the whole paradigm
Yeah.
of the flat earthers to collapse. So they don't spend any time really in there beating down, and I'm sure you could do the same with a lot of them, but that to me seems a very easy, non-scientific, practical one to throw out there.
Mhm.
Instead, they let both sides talk, and then they show some of the experiments of flat earth people that seem to indicate that their hypothesis that the earth is flat is actually incorrect. But that's the only real, the only real nail in the coffin of flat earth theory in there, that I found. Again, I thought it was rather
Mhm.
fair as well, to be honest.
Well, again, I think for me, really the thing they end on, that experiment that they absolutely just shut the thing down with, that because again, they're saying, well, hey, if it's here and then the earth is flat. If it's here, then it's round.
Yeah, it's a nice
And
cinematic ending.
it's a nice cinematic ending. But again, like I said, this documentary neither made me think either way about it. Did not change my mind either way about flat earth. Real quick.
No.
Um, Kaiju Ninja 1985 asks Dean and someone named James about gravity.
Well,
Well,
if
all I
Ja
can
if
say is
James was here, he would say he
Mhm.
doesn't believe in gravity at all, and all that keeps him on the planet Earth is he has weighted boots, which he'll never take off. James is
Yes,
very paranoid about floating off into space.
James really is. Yeah. Now for me, as far as I'm concerned, gravity is my friend. I've never had a problem with gravity. Gravity and I get along really, really well. James is overly paranoid though. He probably should seek some help on that one.
Yeah, I think he's a part of the turtles all the way down camp, by the way.
Yeah. By the way, hold on. I was gonna pop this up. Here it is. Bamboo Soldier points out that if the turtles that are all the way down are ninja turtles, then he can see it. I
Fantastic.
agree. That's what I'm saying. Like again, it's turtles all the way down, and they're teenage, and they are mutant ninja turtles. That's how you explain everything. It makes perfect sense, right? Just saying. It's kind of obvious once you
It's fair.
realize.
It's
Yeah.
fair. Somebody needs to make a documentary about that now.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles all the way down.
Oh, yeah,
Earth
something
is
like that.
Yertle. Earth is Yertle the Ninja Turtle.
Got a catchy title.
Mm-hmm. Bigfoot Atheist Inquiry says gravity has not always been good to me, especially if I was look. I'm not saying that gravity and I haven't had our qualms, right? With particularly when stairs are involved. I'm just saying we're still buds, right? I mean, if you can't have a nice little knockdown drag out with your buddies, and every once in a while, are you even really friends? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
It's fair. You're always fair, Jason.
I try to be. On that note, it's been a wonderful show. I knew this one was going to be fun. As soon as I saw it on Tubi, I'm like, I know what we're talking about. We
It was
have
a
to do
great
this.
pick. It was a great suggestion.
Thank you. I try. And don't get me wrong. As much as the subject matter itself, and again, it's such a well done documentary. I knew Dean would appreciate it, but I also knew that because yes, a few of those scientists do have rather smarmy, condescending attitudes. I'm like,
They all
I know
do,
how
Jason.
Dean's.
You're just kinder to them than I am. Every last one of them does.
I knew Dean. I just sat there. I'm like, Dean is going to love this one. So yes, I may have been a little. I had my plans. I have my schemes. No, Kaiju Ninja. There's no name mix up. We know James and his paranoia about gravity. That's all I'm saying. We know. On that note, guys, we appreciate y'all. Y'all are a great audience. Y'all are why we do this. We really do appreciate y'all. Do obviously, if you aren't yet, like, follow, and subscribe. Inflict us, share us out amongst your friends, your brethren, your flat Earth brethren who are they want to hold on, and they're just that one Qantas flight away from joining the rest of us, those of us who have embraced the truth of Yertle, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stack, and share us out, right? Just say, hey, go listen to these guys, and so you can understand the Yertle the Turtle Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle theory, because it is all the way down. That's all I'm saying.
Sounds fair. And you know what? There's a money spinner in there somewhere. The money spinner would be to the flat earthers, proof that the earth's flat, then book them on a flight from LA to Santiago. And they're like, and halfway through, this is actually proof that it's round. No, it's only 13 hours. Mark Sargent, you didn't tell us the truth.
Yep. Is this why Patricia's steer left?
She might have booked that flight and flown over from LA to Santiago and worked it out.
Exactly. So on that note, guys, again, and y'all are great. We love y'all. Share us out, like, follow, subscribe, name a child after us. And we'll catch y'all next time behind the card catalog.